Stadia is dead. On the 29th of September 2022, Google announced that Stadia's lifespan was terminal and would end on the 18th of January 2023, just over 3 years after its initial launch. So, what went wrong? Now, I have defended the good aspects of Stadia in the past, as I felt it had the potential to be a good competitor in the video game industry. But I have also challenged the negative aspects of the platform. When you take a closer look, those negative aspects are of Google's own cultivation, as are the plentiful and plain to see issues that have led to its shutdown. So welcome everybody, my name is Doragon, and today I want to try and answer the question, what went wrong to cause Stadia's death? Let's start with Stadia's introduction.
I suppose I should start out with a confession. I'm actually not a big gamer, though I do play FIFA 19 quite a bit.
If someone walked onto the stage at the likes of the European Games Expo or similar and made that statement prior to a keynote speech about gaming, I would write them off before hearing another word, as would many others. Their experiences, views, and understanding of gaming as a whole is too narrow to offer a speech on gaming. But this is the exact way that Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, introduced Stadia to the world. A new gaming platform introduced with basically, I'm not a gamer, but not the best first impression, shall we say. Sundar then went on an entire spiel about what Google and Alphabet have achieved outside of gaming, thanks to gamers. In the first 4 minutes of the Stadia announcement, gaming has been treated as some form of stepping stone to more grown-up vocations thereafter, a sentiment that gamers have heard all too often. Now, I don't know who at Alphabet needs to hear this, but if you want people to buy and use your product, don't degrade them on stage and talk about unrelated tech for the first 4 minutes of your keynote. Unsurprisingly, that doesn't get potential customers and developers on board. So it wasn't a strong opening salvo. I know GDC is a developer conference, but that 2019 keynote was streamed live on YouTube and hyped up for gamers ahead of time. A lack of focus on the speech's target demographic gave this announcement a hollow feeling from the get-go. But hey, maybe Google could pull it back with the promises they made about their new platform. As a day one viewer, I had quiet admiration at the ambition of the promises being made by Sundar. There was a heck of a lot. So there'll be a list rolling up the side of the screen here with some of the big points on it. A couple of those big ones out loud though. Games on devices that you already own in 220 countries at 8K resolution and 120 frames per second in a couple of years. And full crossplay on the biggest AAA games. Google made a lot of promises that, if delivered, would have changed the gaming platform landscape completely. Looking back at that GDC conference now in 2022, I still long for the world that Stadia initially envisioned for us. And that's the sticking point. In 2022, prior to the announcement of the shutdown, we still didn't have what they promised. We had the same resolution and frame rates as launch. Crossplay for many titles was excluded on Stadia. Of those 220 promised countries, only 22 had access to the service. Games regularly used less than a single server blade to operate. And those YouTube play buttons? I've never seen one, even when actively searching for them. The important things for the gamer, viewer, and ecosystem were ignored. The facets that would convince players to change platform, viewers to give it a try, or even content creators to dive in, were left on that screen in the 2019 GDC and never brought to fruition. Put simply, these aren't things that you can do to gamers. Gamers expect deliverance on promises made. Just ask CD Projekt Red what happens when you don't deliver on a single game. When that is then scaled up to platform level, even the staunchest of defenders cannot stand up for the positives anymore. It's a common saying in business. It's always better to underpromise and overdeliver. What Google did with Stadia, that they never readdressed during its lifespan, was promise the world, but deliver a cottage. Yeah, well, At least the initial reception of YouTubers would be good, right? Well, no. This here is a tweet thread from a YouTuber called Mr. Fruit, who was meant to do a sponsored video for Google and Stadia on the 25th of November 2019. As you can see from his words, he takes his platform seriously and didn't have a good experience with Stadia. So he turned that sponsorship down. Now I don't know what that equates to on a monetary front, but I do know that Nvidia offers sponsorships of around £2,000 per month, according to a semi-recent video from the YouTuber Finzar. Even if Google only offers parity with Nvidia's offer there, that is a lot of money for a self-employed individual to be turning down to ensure that they remain honest and trustworthy to their viewers. But Mr. Fruit wasn't the only one who had a negative experience. Beat-em-Ups was the same, and he reviewed it as a paying Stadia founder. Spawnwave, Linus Tech Tips, IGN, and many, many more all felt the same or similar. These were thoughts hitting the headlines at the launch of the platform. Thoughts from trusted industry veterans. Thoughts from influencers that did just that. They influenced gamers' choices to basically stay away. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. There were YouTube channels that were born or grew out of Stadia coverage. The likes of Sony Cloud Gaming or the Nerf Report found success as creators as Google predicted they would. Their experiences were stellar and they shared them with the world, inspiring others to become creators in this niche, finding success or friendship and community along the way. Even my own experiences after avoiding the platform following negative reviews were excellent in April 2020. Playing one of my favourite games on my phone with controllers I already owned at a higher resolution, better frame rate, quicker loading times was enough to convince me that cloud gaming was the future of the gaming industry. But the positive experiences were minimal in the grand scheme of things, because the experiences themselves were minimal. And that's down to a failure in marketing. In the week after the announcement of the platform's closure, I still saw people quoting misinformation from 3 years ago as defining factors for the platform's failure. Even in the podcast I host with Massively Gaming and Wibblesniff, I had to correct misinformation when we were talking about Stadia's death, because the marketing had never actually informed my co-hosts what it actually was. Lee literally said to me,
how much was Stadia?
So Stadia was free.
Stadia was, yeah, but you had to buy like the controller and stuff, didn't you?
As we've already covered, that's not how Stadia worked. But review samples all included a Stadia controller and a Chromecast Ultra. All of them. No reviewer approached by Google was offered the option to try the service on the devices that they already owned. You know, a big factor of that original GDC keynote? Every reviewer was given new hardware. So they reviewed the hardware. If the general public or hardcore gamer perception is that you need new hardware, a subscription service, and to buy the games, why would they leave the platform that they're already on that does exactly the same thing? The marketing failed the gamer. It didn't show them or tell them in an engaging manner what the platform offered to them. That's a straight failure of the team in charge of marketing. Because 3 months after launch, if average Joe didn't know what the new PlayStation did, Sony would be categorized as a failure, let alone 3 years after launch. But that's still the position that Stadia is in, even after being cancelled. It also failed developers. Because the player base was so low due to a misunderstanding of the platform, developers didn't want to bring their games to Stadia, because there's no one to play them. Any games that did have Stadia branding garnered massive negative responses. The information for developers on how to bring a game to Stadia seemed to be really hard to access. Developers seemed unaware of the potential that a cloud platform brought with it. Add in that there were no first-party studios games released leveraging what the cloud is capable of, meaning there was no must-play software marketing the platform. Why would other developers try to leverage it when there are bigger markets elsewhere? To put that exclusive point in focus, look at Tears of the Kingdom and God of War Ragnarok. 2 must-play titles that require specific platforms to play. Because the games look good, the platforms look good, and companies therefore want to develop for the platform. Because there will be gamers there. Simple symbiosis marketing. But it went further. Because in this corporate failure, of course it did. Games. Or should I say, lack thereof. Now don't get me wrong, there were games on the platform at launch, including exclusive titles. But the marquee title at launch in 2019 was 2018's Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a game which had completed its entire post-launch support on every other platform before Stadia was even a thing. People had played it, watched it, and were generally completely done with it by the time that Stadia launched. AAA games were hard to come by on the platform if they weren't made by Ubisoft, and most of them were years-old releases that had been experienced over and over again on other platforms. At the end of Stadia's life, 38 of its 230-something titles were from Ubisoft. The next highest amount from any other publisher was 6. 230-odd games over 3 years is also a pitiful amount for a gaming platform. Every other provider manages that quantity every couple of months. So only 230-ish games in 3 years isn't going to pull the existing or hardcore gamer from their current platform. There simply isn't enough content for them. But is it going to pull the casual gamer over? Possibly. And speaking to some members of the playing community, it did for them. But the casual gamer is just that. Casual. They'll pick it up and play now and then, or focus on one particular game, the likes of PUBG, Destiny 2, or FIFA, which doesn't benefit the platform at all. They're not spending on additional games, they're not talking excitedly to their friends about this experience that can only happen on this one platform. They're just not that engaged, because they're happy with their casual experience. So they simply don't spread the word of their good times to other people, which then turns the attention back to the marketing team. How do you bring people to the platform? It's easy. You get the games that gamers want to play. Fairly simple, really. But if, for example, you don't get Elden Ring, the biggest third-party AAA release of 2022, you can't then advertise with that game, because you don't have it. When you are then advertising a 3-year-old indie title as a competitor to the biggest game release of the year, gamers are going to miss you in the hype of the big IP, or think that they've already experienced it. The promotion of the platform matters. What you don't do is leave the promotion of the platform up to the community. For as welcoming as I found the community of players and content creators, many others didn't. We've already established that the general sentiment to Stadia was based on misinformation and negative reviews. But the social media presence of the Stadia players didn't help the general feeling. Whenever there was slightly negative takes on the platform on the likes of Twitter, there would be a dogpile from the vocal community. Now, rarely were these comments harsh or attacking. Most of them were kind and gently explaining how that person's take was wrong. But after 5, 20 or 50 replies, quote tweets and DMs, it can start to feel like a targeted attack. You would regularly see later tweets from Stadia fans mentioning that they had been blocked by the original poster and being annoyed by this. But I get why the original poster did it. Because it's too much. I've been on the receiving end of these dog piles, and they're incredibly difficult to deal with mentally. You feel persecuted by an entire community, and that doesn't exactly make you want to be part of that community. I had hoped that with the death of Stadia, this positive toxicity would end, but the perpetrators have either shifted their tribalism onto a new platform and are continuing to operate as they did, just with more venom now, or they've turned completely toxic, and they will attack anybody who has the slightest positive thing to say about anything Google related. And be aware if you point out their inaccuracies like they've done to everybody else for the past 3 years, for death threats may well appear in your DMs that social media simply won't handle. The community has been the loudest front of this platform in its entire lifespan. They have brought more people into the community, more players onto the platform than Google's own marketing team. But with actions like those that I've highlighted, it isn't a great advertisement of Stadia. It drives potential new customers away from the platform. It drives potential new community members away. It drives potential new friends away. Now, all of this feels like a lot to take in. There's a lot of information, a lot of missteps, a lot of issues. But everything that I've covered is just readily available public information. I've not reached out to Stadia, I've not reached out to Google, I've not reached out to anybody who's lost their job because of this. I have no internal contacts. I don't know what the business plan for the platform was, what the financial turnover was, or the concurrent player numbers. I've not looked at this from a perspective that isn't readily available to everyone. And I have still drawn this many big issues out. Everything I have mentioned are factors that I have picked up on and outlined in previous videos over my 2 years of covering Stadia on this channel. From that first review back in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, all the way through to me predicting a definitive end for the platform on the 12th of September 2022. No business that operates a consumer-facing product can have issues of the size or quantity that Stadia did for an extended period and survive. The fact that game quantity and quality was never addressed was a death knell, as was the lack of any big exclusive titles. A lack of innovation, updates, deliverance on promises, a general lack of monetary and intellectual investment spelt disaster for the platform pretty much from the word go. Stadia failed because through 100 or more little things, it didn't do what it needed to do: appeal to the gamer. It failed at launch to capture the core audience that would bring it success, and it shifted further and further from that goal as time progressed. There is a lot more to this story, especially if you want to look at the internal runnings of Stadia and such. But if we just judge Stadia on the consumer-facing issues, it's still plain to see exactly why Stadia failed. Stadia should stand as a warning to anybody looking to enter the gaming industry with a new platform. For while your tech may be good, great even, if you have no exclusive differential games, a lack of games in general, and you offer a gaming experience that is behind the current home console hardware experience, well, like I say about Luna in this particular video, all you're going to achieve at that point is abject failure.